Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Happy the Games. So in this episode, I'm going to introduce you my understanding of a Reaper's optimal rotation. So first and foremost, Reaper is actually a DPS job. So DPS stands for damage per second. So this video introduces you the level 90, like the highest level at this moment, level 90 Reaper's rotation. So before actually I introduce you my understanding of Reaper's rotation, let's actually go through DPS 101. So all of the DPS jobs, their job is actually to maximize their damage per second output. So since actually each job has all different kinds of skills, there are some skills which actually augment the DPS output. In Reaper's case, it's actually Arcane Circle and the Shadow of Death. So Shadow of Death basically, before Reaper even actually uses the next skill, Shadow of Death should be always the first skill applied to all of the enemies. So Shadow of Death is actually the single target skill, and then Wall of Death is actually the AoE, like you're just targeting more than one target, AoE version of the Shadow of Death. So what these two skills do is they actually apply this debuff on enemy, and then this debuff can actually render Reaper 10% damage increase for the next 30 seconds. So this debuff can be actually extended to 60 seconds. So just to make sure, like when using Reaper, before even striking any enemy, so this debuff needs to be applied. And then during the boss fight, because the boss has actually significant amount HP, this debuff should be renewed every time once it expires. So the next skill Reaper can actually utilize to maximize its rotation or the DPS output is actually Arcane Circle. So this Arcane Circle works in a very unique way. Basically, once Arcane Circle is actually initiated, there are 20 seconds. This Arcane Circle first can actually give a Reaper themselves a 3% DPS increase. So the next thing Arcane Circle does is actually they also give a buff to actually other players, like the players who are actually in a party with the Reaper. So what that skill does is every single time the other players, if they actually use any like a striking skill, so that one striking skill just adds one stack for Reaper themselves. So if actually this stack is actually basically for example, if besides me there is actually only one more player in my party, there are actually two people's party, and I use the Arcane Circle. So my party member actually uses a striking skill, so then I gain one stack. So if I myself also actually use one striking skill, then there are two stacks. So as long as there are two stacks, later on, what I do is Arcane Circle. The third thing Arcane Circle does is instantly Arcane Circle increases 50 Shroud Gauge points. So we actually all know at this point with a 50 Shroud Gauge point, you can actually activate. You can actually use In-Shroud ability to actually activate the third gauge, right? So basically, if actually two stack of Arcane Circle, this special buff, are accumulated, and then if I use In-Shroud, if I actually use In-Shroud this ability, so then that just basically renders more damage to So those are actually the first one-on-one for Reaper job. Like do not hold any skill. Put those skills on cooldown, right? So that's why at the beginning of Reaper's rotation, most Reapers just want to quote-unquote burst. So that means that you just use Arcane Circle right away, and then you actually want to accumulate at least 2 stack. Once you actually accumulate 2 stack, when you actually use Plentiful Harvest, to gain that 50 crowd gauge, Plenty Harvest only consumes 1 stack. As long as there is actually more than 1 stack accumulated earlier, so that Plentiful Harvest will actually render more damage. Just bear in mind that that's the concept of actually using the Arcane Circle. So once the Plentiful Harvest is actually used, then you will actually accumulate 50 crowd gauge, and then you can actually use the skill in crowd to actually activate your 3rd gauge. And then we all know all of the skills in crowd is activated, renders actually more DPS than the normal skills Reaper uses. So the second one-on-one for Reaper is actually the 1-2-3 combos. All of the DPS has a 1-2-3 combos. So in Reaper's case, it's a slice, a waxing slice, and an infernal slice. So these 1-2-3 combos have to be used in this way. If actually you just use a waxing slice without using slice, or you use an infernal slice without using waxing slice or slice, not like the DPS output will be reduced. Infernal slice, like the DPS output will be reduced. But if you just use a slice, waxing slice, infernal slice, like this order 1-2-3 combo, then waxing slice and infernal slice, when you actually use those 2 skills, their DPS output will be increased. So what do these 3 slices do for Reaper is actually they also accumulate 10 soul gauge points. So like to the left of the hotbar here, you can see the soul gauge. Like there are 2 gauges, right? Like up and bottom. So the top one is actually the soul gauge. Once you accumulate 50 soul gauge, you just want to use it, right? You do not want to really hold it. Like there are certain circumstances that you want to hold it. I will actually just speak more about that solution, but it just usually just bear in mind that you do not have to accumulate soul points beyond the 50. Once you actually accumulate 50 soul points, use it. How to consume, right? Like what to use, like what skills we use to consume those 50 soul points. So there are several skills that we can use. We can use the blood stock. So that's actually the single target skill. And then we can also use gluttony. So the differences between these 2 skills is blood stock. Once you use it, for sure, like you consume these 50 soul points, you then activate the Give It or the Gallows. Like either one of these 2 skills you can use the next. Give It and the Gallows require positionals. So what do those Give It and the Gallows do? Once you actually use one of those skills, you just gain 10 shroud points, right? Like at this point, I think everybody understands. So once you accumulate 50 shroud points, you activate Reaper's 3rd gauge. But the difference between Bloodstock and Gluttony is actually Gluttony, once you use this skill, it actually allows you to use both Give It and Gallows. So that just instead of Gluttony consumes 50 soul points, Bloodstock also consumes 50 soul points. So the key point here is whenever Gluttony, you can use Gluttony, you have to use Gluttony. Usually, like when you can use Gluttony, of course you can also use Bloodstock. But why do you not use a skill which actually allows you to use both Give It and Gallows? So basically that means once you actually use both Give It and Gallows, you will gain 20 crowd gauge, right? So just much easier for you to to actually accumulate throughout the gauge. And then another key point here is like glutamine. Once you use it, you put it actually on a cooldown. Whereas the blood stock does not actually have any cooldown, right? Like as soon as you have a 50 soul gauge, blood stock will be able to be used every time. So that's another concept, right? Like I mentioned earlier, you do not want to hold off your cooldown. You don't want to, hey, I don't want to use those skills because I don't want to put them. You want to use those skills, put them into cooldown. Why do you want to put them into cooldown? It's because you want to use them again, right? So when you actually play as a DPS, you need to actually consider this way. You want to actually use those burst skills again and again and again as soon as possible, right? So that's the concept. Every DPS, as long as they can use their burst skill, they can use their buff skill from the very beginning of the fight, then just use it, put them onto cooldown so you can actually use it again next time, right? So then yes, I think those are the concepts of doing Reaper's optimal rotation. And then let's talk about the opener. What does opener mean? I think everybody understands at this point when you actually face a trial or any salvage fight. So when tank actually initiates the fight, tank just does not start the fight like from the very beginning, just run away. They can, that's a very bad tank. Because every job require its own opener. Basically that means before the job actually engages in any fight, they again want to maximize their DPS output, right? Or from a healer's perspective, they actually want to maximize their healing potency. So they actually need to, based on their job's requirements, they actually want to, use 10 to 15 seconds before engaging the fight to just, use their skills to maximize their initial burst. But in actually Reaper's case, the only opener I for sure recommend everybody to use is actually Soul Cell, right? Soul Cell. So what a Soul Cell does is actually once you actually use the Soul Cell, you change your Soul Cell to actually, I think it's called the Harvest. So the beauty of actually changing Soul Cell to this Harvest is if you engage in fight, you start a fight already. Then when you try to use the Soul Cell, your character just stays there. There is actually the casting time, right? I think it's 4 to 5 seconds. That's quite long. But outside the battle, you have not started any fight yet, if you want to change the Soul Cell to Harvest, you just click that button and then instantly, so Soul Cell will be actually changed to the Harvest. What Harvest does is Reaper is considered as a melee DPS. That means you have to get very close to the boss to do your damage per second, to do your GDC rotation. But then for some reason, because you want to, for example, dodge the point blank AOE, the boss actually places on the arena. Basically, you just actually stays away from the boss for maybe 2-3 seconds. So that 2-3 seconds, you don't want to just stay away and then just stand there doing nothing, because you are melee DPS and you cannot use the other skills because you stay away from the boss. And that's the time you use that Harvest, because Harvest you can just throw your scythe, your weapon towards the boss, right? So that's actually one opener everybody should actually activate. And then Harp. So what's the best time to use Harp? Harp is actually this range. It's actually another ranged skill Reaper can use, right? When the countdown timer, when tank actually initiates the fight, when tank wants to initiate the fight, so tank actually starts the countdown timer. When the countdown timer counts down to 2 seconds, that's the time you can use Harp. Because pretty much you click the Harp, and then when the Harp skill really hits the boss, the countdown timer will actually go down to 1, and that's the time all of the tanks, they should actually initiate the fight. So don't worry, when you actually use a heart, when the countdown comes to 2 seconds, you won't really pull the boss instead of the tank pulling. So tank will still get the boss from you, but then you actually just start giving boss damage, right? But then again, when you use heart, you do not stay next to boss. You stay away. There is a range, right? And then the next thing, the tank will actually initiate the fight. You don't want to lose any second when the fight is starting. So right after using heart, you want to use your gap closer, right? Which is healthy ingress. You use your gap closer, and then you just instantly get very close next to the boss, and then you start actually doing your rotation thing. Okay? So there is actually a level 90 dummy. So I'm actually gonna show you what I mean here. So there are actually, so far there are 2 rotations, the best rotations. I think players from the Balance Discord, they actually have figured out for Reaper. One is called the early gluttony rotation. So the other one I think is called the early arcane circle rotation. So basically the difference here is like if you use the early gluttony rotation, you do not hold off the gluttony skill, right? You just actually put this skill to cool down, and then just let it, let it actually regain its usage. I think gluttony usually needs 60 seconds. 60 seconds, and that's the cooldown, right? So I prefer to use an early gluttony rotation. Not only I can put a gluttony not only I can put a gluttony to cool down as early as possible. So by doing this, the timer, the timing when I actually use the other skills, they just follow through naturally. Okay, all right. So let's actually go ahead to practice. So first aim striking dummy. Like I said, let's just imagine now there is a tank who actually starts the countdown. When the countdown, it's when the countdown just counts down. So you first just use this soul cell. But later you can see the soul cell just change it to a harvest mode. Whenever you see there is this counterclockwise the rotating basically you can see this harvest mode when this skill is lit up, right? So that means you now can use harvest mode, this skill, and then this skill basically just renders more damage, way more damage. Okay, so now the countdown to 2 seconds. Now you want to use your heart. Once you use your heart, right away you just actually get close to the boss. And then from here, the first thing you want to do, like I mentioned earlier, is to give any boss debuff, Shadow of Death, fight. You want to actually use your heart king right away. And then and now you can actually use both giving and the galaxy. You actually gain 2 stats. You see the plentiful harvest is actually lit up. Use it right away. Instantly now you actually have 70 shroud gauge. You can actually activate a shroud, and now you can actually use the global field enter shroud. Alright, and then you use your soul slice to actually instantly gain another 50 soul points. This time you use unveiled gibbet, right? Because that's basically a enhanced version of a bloodstock. And now you can use the gibbet and gallows require positional. Alright. So that's actually so let's actually reset the first gauge, and then let's actually wait, I would say 45 seconds till Arcane Circle is actually renewed. Alright, so yes, basically the concept is here, right? So the strongest skills Reaper can actually use, they're all under the shroud, the third gauge, right? You have to activate the third gauge, then you can use those skills. And then to be able to activate the third gauge, you have to accumulate 50 shroud points, right? To be able to accumulate shroud points, you have to activate Give It or Gallows skills. And to be able to use Give It or Gallows skill, then you have to accumulate 50 soul points, right? So you actually accumulate 50 soul points, and then you have to use your points consuming skills. That is either Gluttony or Blood Stop to activate Give It or Gallows. So just so you know, for Reapers, I think the best way for everybody to understand its optimal rotation is to think backward, right? What's the best skill you can use to render the most DPS, and how you can get there step by step, right? Okay. So I'm just now going to actually do a full-on rotation. I'm not going to actually waste much time. So I will actually use all of my rotation skills, and then at a certain point, if I think that's beneficial for everybody to watch this video, trying to understand, the reason why I use certain skills, then that's the time I will explain. Okay. So first, activate a soul cell. You will see, soul cell is instantly changed into Harvest Moon. So that's just, when I have to use, for example, during the fight, when you are here, very far away from the boss, then that's the time I have to use a Harvest Moon, right? Harvest Moon or Heart. Whenever you can use a Harvest Moon, use a Harvest Moon because it just renders way, way more damage than Heart, okay? So now the tank, initiates the countdown, and the countdown goes down to 2, so I use my Heart, I use my Gap Closer, so that way I keep blocking up, and then I activate 50 soul points, I use my Arcane Circle, I use my Glitch, so side of the boss, I go mine, okay, so plenty of Harvest activated, now I can use that. So all of the skills, once you actually activate it in round, not really require anything. Okay, now you see almost shut off that, so it was just out, so I just apply that. Whenever you can consume those points to actually use it, either Give It or Gallows, always use it. Do not wait. Do not wait. Now I can tell you 50 shot points. Now I can activate my third again. Okay, so pay attention to the shut off that. So it's down again, so I just give one. So this is the time you have to wait a little bit to use your full technique. You can for sure use the True North. That just give you 8 seconds. You do not really have to worry about your precision. Okay, now I have to use my 1, 2, 3 combo. So now I gain 60 soul points again. Use my Gallows. Yeah, pay attention to the debuff, turn off that debuffing almost now. Give it a boss. So this is a critical point. Pay attention to how many minutes left before I can use my next Gluttony, and how many seconds left before I can actually activate Arcane Circle again, right? The Arcane Circle for 9 seconds. When the Arcane Circle go back down to like now, I can actually activate it. This is actually the faster time. Okay, see now. So I actually use the Arcane Circle after 2 seconds. See what happens now. This is actually the best time to use Arcane Circle, because any Arcane Circle, you reproduce actually again. Now I'm ready, use the Gallows and the Give It to 20 points. ice and the soul ice, they are also ready, so I can actually use them to instantly gain 50 soul points. So now you can see very quickly, I have actually gained another 50 drop points. I can actually go into the again. Pay attention to how often I the shadow of death. This debuff skill. This is the time you do not want to consume right away because pay attention to how many seconds gluttony required to refill. Only several seconds. Right? You want to wait there, right? See shadow of death now, almost now. So these boss shadow of death, debuff again. Yeah, so 40 shots. Yeah, again 40 shots. Pay attention to how many seconds left for the next arcane circle to be used. 20 seconds now, right? So in 20 seconds, I can for sure gain another 10 points of drop, right? Now basically I got 50. And pay attention to how many seconds left for your shut off dash. Okay, first the shut off dash. You can see my arcane circle is again. So basically, this is called the double enshroud, right? I can actually enshroud it twice. And then both of these, I use enter enshroud. They are actually enter arcane circle. Basically, I can actually gain the optimal DPS output. Yeah, so you see now both my soul slash and soul slash, they are down, so I have to use the combo to actually calculate the soul points, like so. Minor, but it's still, it's not optimal. Because earlier, I knew the agility only needed maybe 12 seconds before I can actually use it. And then I use the blood stock. You do not want to do that. You want to always give priority to use the gluttony. Okay, now I got the points again. Pay attention to that 3 seconds out before I move for the next arcane circle. Arcane circle will be always after either the burst. Faster time you can actually activate the next burst within the arcane circle time. Okay, so rotation-wise, let's actually stop here. I'll just actually say a bit more about the Reaper's traits, right? So Reapers, we have several traits, very important. So we have lag sweep, true north, faint, second wind, arm's length, and blood buffs, right? So at this point, when you actually first level your Reaper to level 90, you should be actually quite familiar with these traits. So I found, when I used the large, I found many DPS players, they do not really want to use these traits except the arm's length. What the arm's length does is it just, for I think 6 seconds, it actually nullifies any knockback or draw-in abilities. Basically, for example, if a boss, they just want to knock you off, knock you super off away from the from them, or some boss, if you do not precision correctly, or if you do not use the arm's length, the boss will basically just knock you off the arena, basically just instantly kill you. So we should know arm's length. Use it when actually boss is actually trying to use the knock off or draw in ability to actually strike you, right? But then, like, you know what, for the rest of abilities you also want to use, I'll just actually say here from the most important to the least important. So true north, right? We all know what true north does. So Reaper is actually a melee DPS. All of the melee DPS actually require precision nodes. What a precision nodes mean is like if you actually activate this, the target ring. You see like this striking dummy, for example, faces towards the the upper part of the screen, and then we have let's just assume this direction is north, and then like we have west here, east, and south, right? So basically most DPS, melee DPS, so their positions require them to actually go side of boss or rear of boss or back of boss, back of the enemy. So when they actually go there and then just do their corresponding skills, that skill, like the overall damage output, will be actually increased, right? But sometimes, like due to the boss mechanics, you cannot really easily to go to side of the boss. For example, I'll give you one example in Pandemonium 3S. When both tanks they actually resolve their tank cluster, if actually the main tank stays north and then off tank stays on the east, of course my Reaper can still go here when I need to do the side positional strike. But be careful because like this tank buster actually has a small AOE effect, right? So if I accidentally get very close to the main tank, so when that main tank's AOE resolves, I might get hit. So I do not want to do that. So the safest way is to just stay behind the boss, use True North. So True North actually renders 10 seconds. So now I can use either my Vivid or Gallows. These are only the two skills which actually require precisionals without really having to go to the side, right? True North. So next, several traits I'd like to talk about are Second Wind and Bloodbath. Let's actually talk about the Second Wind and the Bloodbath. These two skills basically just help Reaper gain small amount of HP. Many DPS players, they just ignore these two skills. They think like, healers can just heal them up easily. In severe situation, for example, when you do Savage, sometimes the healers, they actually run out of their MP, or like, one healer just dies. And at that point, if your HP, if as the melee DPS, your HP is not as high as enough, so you should actually use a Bloodbath or Second Wind to really help healers. The differences between these two skills is Bloodbath, you activate, it does not just regain your HP right away. You have to actually strike the boss. Whenever you strike the boss, I think it is that 15 seconds. You can see like now those like 463, like 727. Those are green colored attacks. So that means that those are the small amount of HP I just gained, right? So Second Wind, however, it's just a straightforward. If I use my Second Wind, you can see like I just gained 747 points HP. So that's just a very straightforward. So again, like you see, like both the Second Wind and the Bloodbath, they actually have their own cooldown, right? Again, like back to my DPS 101, you do not want to hold off any cooldown. Even like to be honest, from the very beginning, because the Reaper has the gap closing skill, health ingress, right? You just use health ingress and then instantly you just gap close to the boss. Some DPS they don't have any gap closing skill like that. When tank actually starts a cooldown before striking the boss, you should actually use a sprint, right? Sprint basically you can see just make you actually run or run to a direction way much faster. And then you can see sprint has this 60 seconds cooldown. So that just falls to my understanding of doing the rotation. You do not want to hold off any skills, use them whenever you can. Usually, when is the best time for me to use my bloodbath? At the beginning of every Savage fight, usually the first skill the boss uses is actually the party white or red white AOE, right? For sure, like at that moment you can imagine healers, because that's the beginning of the fight. Healers, their MP is actually at the maximum. They for sure have enough healing potency to actually heal everybody up, right? But as a good DPS, you still just want to use your bloodbath, because there is some situation healers might not be able to heal you up to the fullest, because healers might think that they don't have to, because the boss actually targets tank, right? The boss does not target you as DPS. So if for some reason your HP is not actually healed up to its fullest, and like the healers they struggle, after this party wide AOE mechanic, if boss actually uses another mechanic, and then as a DPS, either you might not be able to dodge, or you forget to dodge the AOE, you get hit, you might just get killed. But if you actually use your bloodbath, just that small amount of HP might just save your life. So just remember that always use all of your resources. So the next two traits I'd like to talk about. The next one is a feint, F-E-I-N-T. So what feint does is a feint. You see, like I use a feint on the enemy, it actually lasts 10 seconds. So just like the tank's reprisal, feint also actually reduces boss's damage output for 5%. Do not ignore this 5%. You might think, hey, it's only 5% though, like no big deal. No. So yes, it's not a big deal when you actually do the normal raid or very easy fight. But when it comes to Savage, every boss actually uses the heavy party wipe. What heavy party wipe mean? Heavy party wipe basically means like the party wipe, like the boss is going to just strike everybody. It's called a heavy party wipe. That hit is actually way heavier than the normal party wipe. So that hit will actually significantly reduce everybody's HP, right? So for sure, usually at that point, tank, they actually use their reprisal, which actually reduces the percent of the boss's damage output, or the other tank can actually use a party wipe mitigation, right? Healers can actually, put some shield, like, say, for example, you can actually put a shield on everybody, and then you do not want to ignore your feint, right? So usually for each Savage fight, let's make Savage, for example, there are 4 DPS. Every DPS has this feint ability. As long as one of you uses feint, you actually just give boss additional 5% damage reduction. So just a good DPS from my understanding is like first know their rotation very well. Do not hold off their first skills cooldown, and then do not hold off their resources. So by talking like resources, I mean like these traits, abilities, right? Last but not least is a lag sweep. The lag sweep for some fights, basically you just we actually call this skills as a kicking, right? So like if my character just kicked the enemy, and then just give enemy a stun debuff. The kick lag sweep only lasts I think 4 to 5 seconds, but in these 4 or 5 seconds, you basically just stun the enemy. Enemy cannot just use any mechanic. Again, do not ignore this ability. This is actually sometimes very important, right? You have to kick the enemy, and then the enemy just cannot really use the next biggest mechanic. So yes, these are the traits I just want to lay out here. For every level 90 DPS, you want to use your traits. You want to basically use all of your skills to its fullest. Alright, thank you so much for watching this episode of Final Fantasy, and then I will actually try my best to understand Sage and my other tank, Dragoon, the other DPS job I have better, so I can actually make more videos about the best rotation for those jobs.